Hey. Hola, hello, ciao bambini. Can you please sit down if you're gonna see the next session, please? Podéis sentaros por aquí, los que os vayáis a quedar a la siguiente sesión.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. So I think we're going to start now so we can try to be on time for this session. This session is going to be in English. Apologies for the Spanish speakers. Who doesn't understand English at all? Lingua imperialista.
¿Quién no entiende el inglés para nada?
Para nada. Can someone help him and translate a few things? Yeah. Okay, so there is a
And
translation.
Marcelo also.
Translation Marcelo, but Marcelo knows everything already, so he doesn't. No, I'm joking. Okay. So yeah, so I'm Francesca Bria. I'm based at Nesta, which is the UK Innovation Agency, and I'm the coordinator of Decent, Decentralized Citizen Engagement Technology, and we're hosting, let's say, this all week, and tomorrow we're going to have the final conference. And it's been a very big journey for Decent. So we are now at the final event of the project. We started 2.5 years ago. Decent is a European project. I don't know how many of you have been, know about the project, so I will kind of briefly give you a little bit of introduction to the project. And this session is going to be divided into two sections. So the first one is with Andreas Caritzis and Javier Ruiz and Paulo Gerbaudo. So they're all part of the advisory board of Decent. So they've been accompanying us throughout the journey for the last 2 years. And the first part is going to be a little bit a broader reflection, techno-political reflection about what is the new forms of democracy that we see in emerging, what are the citizen movements that are changing society and the institutional power, and how this is happening. So with the aim of the Decent project has been from the very beginning to work together with all the citizen movement and social movement that have been transforming democracy for the last years, and then working with them on the ground to think about what is a democratic technological infrastructure that can improve the way we organize and can change the relationship between the way we communicate, we self-organize, and then also the relationship with the new institutional power. So this has created, in our view, in the last year, we've seen, of course, the big wave of social movements from the Indignados, the Occupy, which have been spreading around from Greece to Istanbul, to Korea, to, new network movement, new popular movements that have been reclaiming institutional power in a new way. And also the emergence of hybrid political parties, like Podemos, like Five Star Movement in Italy, like the Pirate Party in Iceland and across Europe, that are hybrids form of organization. So it's not the classical political party form, but it's a new hybrid between a citizen movement, a popular movement, and some kind of more hierarchical forms of organizing. And then, of course, with the opening here, which we are very proud and happy to be hosted in Madrid, for los ayuntamientos del cambio, so the cities of change, which I think it's another new form of a citizen movement that is now governing the cities, which is posing the question and inspiring, I think, all of Europe, what it means to govern for the people and with the people. So to really aggregate the political power which comes from the grassroots, from the social base, and turn that into new public policies that can reclaim the institution away from the austerity, financialized neoliberalism that we have now imposed upon us into the new politics for the people. So new social policies, and also, of course, new right to the city movement that claim access to public space and democratic management of resources and infrastructure. And what is the role that technology is playing into all of this? So we've done our bit with Decent, which has been on one side building infrastructure. So the reflection we started from was a lot of these movements are organizing, but they're using corporate tools. So they're relying on big corporations, mainly with a base in the US, like Facebook, like Google, like Twitter, like YouTube, like all the kind of infrastructure that Silicon Valley is giving us. And of course, these infrastructure are huge, and they provide a lot of visibility in hacking the mediatic space. However, we understand these infrastructures are not designed for democracy. They are designed for selling people data. They are designed to provide a model of consumer society that's maximizing profit and efficiency, and there is nothing about the management of the commons. There is nothing about public accountability. There is nothing about democratic decision-making. So you cannot govern the Ayuntamiento del Cambio with the people, for the people, with tools that are built by big corporations where you have no control on how the technology is built and what the technology is used for. In particular, we worked a lot on data ownership. What are the new data infrastructure being critical infrastructure for the 21st century? How the companies are using data, profiling us, aggregating data in real time, aggregating data all the time to make a big business out of data. How we can gain technological sovereignty, taking back ownership of data and using data to unleash a new program which is a democratic program, but also an emancipatory program. So how can we use data to improve public services, to self-organize, and to kind of gain the autonomy for these kind of movements to grow? So we have been kind of working with these big questions, I think, and something we find out is it's pretty hard to do. So that's why we're all here together, because we need alliances. So one movement cannot do it alone, one small organization cannot do it alone, one city cannot do it alone, and even a network of cities probably cannot do it alone. So not only we need alliances and coalitions among these cities of change, amongst new political parties that want to change things and popular movements, and we need to work together towards how we grow and sustain an ecosystem that is based on the commons, which is a democratic ecosystem that's privacy aware, surveillance free, puts power into the hands of the people, and can sustain and grow. So it's a big challenge, I think, and hopefully we're all here to debate how we're gonna get there. So I pass the word to the speakers here. So I think we have a very good mix of people which have incredible experiences. I mean, Andreas has been very involved in Syriza at the very start. You were very close to Cyprus, if I'm not wrong, and kind of advising the leadership of Syriza. And after the kind of referendum and the coup d'etat of the EU financial, you left Syriza, right? And you left Syriza and you started now going back to kind of organizing socially and building power from the grassroots. So it will be very good, maybe starting with you, to know how is your perception of the situation we are in, what has been happening with Syriza, and why do we need to build power going beyond traditional political parties, starting from the grassroots, from the society.
Yes. Thank you very much. I was asked to come here and contribute to this session, presenting various thoughts regarding feasible political strategy and methodology based on lessons from what happened in Greece the last year. The core assumption of what I'm going to say is that the political imagination, the methodology of mobilization, and the organizational principles of the traditional political left movements do not meet the requirements of today's political and social antagonisms. It seems that there is a time lag or inability of adaptation to the emerging authoritarian environment that the neoliberal project is imposing to our societies. Another crucial aspect of the necessary update that we need is the need to transform our methodologies, organizational schemes, and our imagination and mentality of fighting, taking into consideration technological advances that shift the background and the rules of the political and social struggles. This is not just a matter of putting new technology in the traditional paradigm of doing politics. What we need is a paradigm change, because the current level of performance of what we could call forces of emancipation, movements, political organizations, is not sufficient. The political left and the movements seem outdated as social organizers of building popular power in a productive way. Instead, we continue to express and represent demands in a toxic political environment designed to be intolerable to people's needs. On the other hand, we have a lot of thousands of alternative initiatives that seem marginal, feeble, they lack a critical mass, they are not integrated into larger operational frameworks, it is difficult to upscale, and they end up isolated and fragmented, destined to face the same difficulties again and again. So it seems that we need a new organizational or operational DNA, so to speak, capable to replicate in various levels and sectors, creating cells of productive collective activity governed by a different than the dominant logic. Cells that then can be combined in such a way that a new paradigm of emancipatory social change can emerge. Another thing that I would like to highlight is that it is vital to have in mind that the development of technologies and the building of institutions that promote democracy will take place in a context of brutal political and social struggles. We should be frank to ourselves. Despite all the subtleties and the complexities of our current situation, the truth is that we are facing an extermination process and in danger of a severe regression of what we could call modern societies that could affect the fate of humankind in the entire planet. We are entering, without our will, in a transition phase in which a new kind of despotism is fast emerging, combining the logic of financial competition and profit with technological advances and pre-modern modes of brutal governance. Multidimensional exclusion of people in terms of participating in crucial decisions and satisfaction of vital needs, multidimensional process of enclosure in terms of resources, territories, knowledge, information, and so on, and of course, pure lethal violence and wars. At the same time, we are facing long-term tendencies that approach a critical point, threatening humankind with severe regression, as I said. Depletion of natural resources, environmental instability, food crisis, collapse of national and regional systems of administration and performance of basic social functions. This is what is happening now. The elites care only how are they going to accumulate more power, and by doing so, they push us in decline. Neoliberalism, which is the name that we used to use, is not only unfair for the people without economic power, it represents a future that reduces the emancipatory dimension of modernity, of what we could call our heritage, into an unstable and feeble outcry within the Dark Ages. They're trying to create a new historical scheme in which the emancipatory dimension of modernity is just an incident, an episode that is going to end. And the most crucial, according to my understanding, is that neoliberalism cannot provide the proper conceptual and operational framework for real solutions to today's global threats of mankind. They create these problems, and at the same time, they do not provide the conceptual framework in order to find solutions. Because these solutions must be based on sustainability, solidarity, and openness in order to check the long-term tendencies of reaching a crucial biosocial limit, the rise of inequality and barbarism that gradually takes the form of an extermination process, as I said, of the poor, of the weak, and the threat of digital, military, financial totalitarianism. However, at the same moment, for the first time in our revolutionary history, we have so huge reserves of embodied capacities, a vast array of rapidly developing technologies of connection and data collection, and values and life philosophies from different cultures within our reach. So apart from the dangers, we are living in extreme times in terms of unprecedented potentialities. So, the context of developing technologies and institutions for democracy will be a very brutal battlefield. My experience from Greece shows that we are forced to evolve and become more efficient, while at the same time, as people, we are suffering huge losses, we retreat bleeding, and every day we are pushed into greater misery and despair. So if this is the case, Are we losing our time with democracy, relevant technologies, and other luxuries instead of focusing on survival strategies? Are we disillusioned here and miss the overall picture? It depends on how we frame our work in this broader picture. The crucial question is, does democracy matter in terms of survival? Or is it just something superfluous? The answer is yes. Democracy is not a luxury, as the mainstream narrative suggests, but the most powerful weapon of the popular classes, if properly treated. In order to respond adequately in this suffocating condition that we are entering, new organizational standards and methods are needed for the engagement of thousands of people in this day-to-day and multi-level fight. Here, the role of technologies and institutions that promote democracy is crucial. Democracy is the most powerful tool we have at our disposal in order to deploy a survival strategy. We must unleash all the embodied capacities of the people and throw them into this battle. By transferring the decisions to the people, by giving them the space, the tools, and the freedom to realize and mobilize their capacities, we can unlock crucial reserves of creative power. Unlocking these reserves will change substantially the balance of forces between the popular classes and the elites. This is the lesson of the Syrian Kurds. Democracy is not mainly an ideological preference. It's what the people need in order to make full use of their embodied capacities, in order to upgrade their power and survive. And that's the work on developing technologies that enhance participation and democratic decision making. That's why it's an essential dimension of the battle that has been intensified the last years. It's the answer on the how question. How we, movements, organizations, institutions, fighting for emancipation, and societies running a severe risk, are going to mobilize the human reserves of creative power, which are the only form of power we can have at our disposal in this struggle. I will skip the part of movements and political organizing, and I will go straight to the level of government. Okay, and say a few things. Sorry. Okay. The crucial question to my mind is, what kind of left we need in order to engage with the state in such a way that will promote even further people's leverage against the elite's hostility? The level of the state has its own modalities, but there is nothing there that in principle excludes us. However, when the left approaches government power, structural inadequacies and weaknesses can be disastrous. The administration of the state, moreover, poses questions to us and tasks that we cannot avoid. There is no way to transcend the dominance of the logic of profit and competition and deal with today's challenges if we do not address large-scale questions of organizing, planning, managing, and administering societies. Being at the leadership of Syriza during the period of preparation of assuming government power, I have come to the conclusion that the left is missing a mode of governmentality stemming from its own logic and values. We miss a modality of administrating populations and run basic social functions in a democratic, participatory, and cooperative way. One aspect of this lack is the indifference toward issues that are related with implementation processes. The prevailing rhetoric was that the problems are political and not technical. So all we have to do was to decide what we want to do, not to explore the ways in order to be able to implement and the infrastructure that we need. The implicit premise was that the crucial point was to be in the government and the ministries taking political decisions, and then somehow these decisions would be implemented by some technical in nature state mechanisms. Apart from the fact that this attitude contradicted with what we were saying regarding the corrosive effect of the neoliberal transformation of the state and the complexity of being in the EU and the Eurozone in this respect, it also shows the prevailing superficial understanding of the notion transformation of the state and justifies fully the need for a radical redesign of the operating system of the left which is the part that I skipped. Okay, so the major problem is that a mentality like this ignores the obvious fact that the range of one's political potential in being in the government is determined by what one knows how to do with the state. The implementation process is not a technicality, but the material basis of our political strategy. What the traditional left takes to be the political essence, namely the general strategic decision and discussion, what to do with the debt, with the privatizations, with the banks, and so on, is just the tip of the iceberg of state politics. The implementation process is the iceberg of the state politics beneath the surface. Actually, it's where the political struggle within the state becomes hard between class adversaries to prevail over implementation, that is to prevail over reality, over shaping reality. And yes, just one minute. One of the results in the case of Syriza was that the program committee, the highest political organs, and the departments of the party, instead of working deliberately on managerial issues regarding steps, methods, and difficulties of implementing our own policies, and organizational and technological issues like restructuring processes in the various state institutions that we would have access to, they were sites of political argumentation in the most general and abstract terms. The tip, you have to know that, the tip of the iceberg is not going to move the iceberg by itself as long as it is not supported by a multi-level and multi-personal implementation strategy with clear orientation, functional methods, and high-level coordination. This is the integrated concept of state politics that we have forgotten in practice, and by doing so, we tend to fail whenever we approach the tip of the iceberg. So the question, and I'm concluding with this, is not whether we should fight for the tip or not, but whether we have any clue what to do with the iceberg beneath it or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if I can summarize, not sure what you spoke, just to also see what maybe Paolo can add to the conversation. I mean, what I understand is you're saying basically neoliberalism is a zombie. It doesn't serve for the survival of the people, but it's still dominant. But also the state may not serve for this emancipatory project of radical change and radical institutional change, because probably it's not designed to serve that purpose, the operation of the state. I mean, I think this is like a big question, and also the majority of the conversation here is mainly articulating, I mean, sometimes that's what the left is doing, I think in Europe at least, articulating much more the relationship between social movements and social movement claims and the party form, or what the political party can do in order to represent this multitudinary new composition, but much less what we do if we take state power, which is this kind of broader question. I think, I mean, what we've seen with Syriza definitely show that in very short time, you understand that this is probably very limited in order to have a broader transformation that will lead to a societal autonomy which goes beyond administering the state. But I leave it to Paolo that, I mean, Paolo has been working a lot on new political party form and new citizen populist citizenism, yeah. And I mean, it would be nice also if you can have a dialogue with what the experience from Syriza tell us.
Yes, I mean, what I want to talk about is digital democracy and how it has been developing in recent years, recent months. I mean, this event is a manifestation of that. The manifestation that we are in a phase in history of extraordinary experimentation with democracy and with new democratic practices. Yeah. I mean, the reason why that is quite easy to understand, because we come from a period of crisis, of legitimacy, of existing democracy, of that model of democracy that accompanied the industrial era. I mean, if you look at all the indicators of trust in democratic institutions, they've all been at historical lows for many years. Voter participation, share of votes for mainstream parties, trust in parliament, state, government. You know, as we know, unfortunately, the only branches of the state that still have some trust are the police, to less extent judges, parties, government, and so on and so forth are at their lowest. I mean, 15% or 20% of the population has any trust in these institutions. And we also know why that is because people actually see that their decisions, their participation in the political process through voting or otherwise does not lead to solutions to their problems. Yeah? I mean, this is a stereotypical thing that we hear from many people, but actually is quite close to reality. People see that politics has no options, that either you vote for PP or PSOE, la misma mierda es, no? Como, as the indignados did say. So the question is, what kind of response are we seeing to that? I mean, we are seeing a lot of responses in terms of development of new platforms and new processes. New platforms ranging from deliberation platforms such as Lumio or Liquid Democracy, developed by the Pirate Party, to platforms like Decidi in Barcelona, recently developed in Barcelona. Various technologies, processes that attempt to fill this democratic void, right? And the interesting thing is that, as it often happens at times of innovation, while there is a lot of activity in terms of developing new platforms, we are still a bit behind when it comes to concepts, to actually categorizing what these platforms are about, distinguishing the different processes that are there, and making sense of what they mean. I mean, one way to understand that is through this lens of citizenism, which in my forthcoming book I describe as the contemporary radical ideology. Citizenism is a populism of the citizen, a libertarian populism, which is not like the populism of old, the populism of the people, but a populism in a positive sense, which starts from the individual, starts from the citizen, and starts from a demand for citizenship, from the perception that citizenship has been eroded, and the erosion of citizenship, the erosion of our power as voters, as people in associations and so on and so forth, is ultimately what has led oligarchic power, the troika, the bureaucrats, the financiers, and so on and so forth, and the political class to dominate us, to overlook our feelings and our decisions and our intentions. Yeah? In these platforms, one can see precisely the kind of project to construct a new democracy that instead of starting from the people, starts from the citizen, and from the citizen builds up the popular will, right? So if we want to go back to Rousseau and the classic kind of idea of popular sovereignty. So the key concepts there are democracy, which has been the demand of the 2011 movements, the indignados, Occupy, and so on and so forth. Sovereignty, because there is a realization that democracy is sovereignty. Democracy is not a nice word. Democracy is about power. Power to decide, power to control. And finally, citizenship as the grassroots foundation of sovereignty, as individual participation in popular power. Yeah? So when you look at the different ways in which these platforms have tried to implement this kind of citizens' democracy, there are different principles, there are different models. There is a more participatory direct democracy model, which comes from more libertarian, neo-anarchist circles, the idea that we all need to be taken into account. I mean, the assembly in the protest camps is the perfect example, right? It usually works best in small groups. The smaller the group, the better. It is a more qualitative model of democracy where it matters the actual content of decisions. Then you have the opposite model, plebiscitary democracy, based on large participations, large numbers, and, however, very simple decisions that ultimately go down to the binary decision, yes or no, 0 or 1, right? And we saw that in the Ochi referendum in Greece, right? So you have a huge participation, millions of people, but it's millions of people that can decide very little. And ultimately, not even what they decided was respected at all. On the other hand, instead, you have few people that though can decide very big things. They can even decide what minutes. Should we go out with the demo at 12:30 or 12:35? Should we have this slogan or this other slogan? And everybody has to be taken into account. So there are these different models that then also map onto issues of legitimacy and efficiency, right? There can be a democratic decision that is very efficient and very legitimate. And in turn, there can be a democratic decision that is very legitimate and very inefficient. As, for example, Monedero, the ideologue of Podemos, famously said that the assemblies of 2011 were very democratic but very inefficient. Though we might not adhere totally to that idea, I think that most people will recognize that there was an element of truth in that there were beautiful democratic processes, highly participatory. They allowed many people to have a say. At the same time, they often turn into democracia de culo de hierro. That is democracy of an iron ass, because you need to have an iron ass to sit through an assembly of 7 or 8 hours. So basically, just to conclude, there are all these different elements that need to be taken into account when we develop this new digital democracy, when we think of a new assemblage that can take us through the coming decades. Because I think that what we are experimenting now is really a new organizational blueprint for a digital society, which is an exceptional phase. We are fucking lucky, guys. We are living through one of those rare historical openings when things can really be made up from scratch, almost, right? The industrial society is over, neoliberalism is in a zombie status, and we have the huge historical duty to build new blueprints that will then accompany us possibly for the next 30, 40, 50 years. A lot of fun, but also a lot of duty on our shoulders. So to conclude, I think that it is important to take all these different metrics into account, right? Legitimacy, efficiency, participatory or plebiscitary model, as we develop a new system of decision-making and deliberation, which, as I see it, is not going to be just one thing or the other. There is not one size fits all in this at all. Different stages of the democratic process are better matched with different models of democracy and different democratic practices. What is important is to somehow match them in the right way and construct a model that can integrate all of them. And just to conclude, I think also that to develop a successful democratic model that is one that is both efficient and legitimate, we also need to go beyond the opposition between participation and representation, which is an opposition which was understandable for a long time in the crisis of industrial democracy, but which now to me makes less and less sense. What we need instead is a model of participatory representation, where representation is based on participation as the means through which it gathers its content and its consensus, right? And on which, on the other hand, participation is participation in a collective process which is representational as well. I mean, if we look at Barcelona en Comú, for example, that is very clear. On the one hand, it is very participatory, it is very grassroots, it is very interactive. On the other hand, it has a leader, and it has a kind of central committee, right? The same thing goes for Ahora Madrid, goes for Podemos, right? Again, you can have more hyper-leaderistic and more participatory forms, but it's always a matter of in-between. It is never one or the other. It is never just pure participation or pure representation.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think it will be interesting after when we have a conversation, because this, I think, opens to various discussion and comments that I think people here can input. I mean, my kind of comment to what you just said, I mean, is on one side, you're advocating for more, how do we really integrate collective intelligence in the process in different ways? Your recipe seems to be, we have to try it. Experiments, when you talk about blueprints, there is no one way of doing it, so we need to have a variety of experiments and continue to try and see what works and then scale it, and basically we learn by doing it. I mean, the other question when we talk about referendum or even attempt to radically change governments, and we have here lots of friends from Brazil, and we've seen it with Syriza, this kind of coup d'etat from the elite are very strong. So you think you manage to kind of have popular consensus and go there and change things in order to take away power from the elite and reallocate this power to implement radical social policies, but they block you. So, but this is also from very minimum things, like in Italy, we had referendum against privatization of water, which was constitutional referendum. The people decided water shouldn't be privatized, the beginning of the movements for the commons, and now that the institutions are trying to implement this, well, the water is being privatized in the process of governance. So, you know, you have, maybe the network is public still, but the private companies are managing the service, and they're managing also the business model, so they sell water that is supposed to be public. So there is a first step of popular power and decision making, and a second step of how do we make sure that things happen through governments, which is, I think, a broader question. Then Javier, so Javier, you've been working a lot on security, surveillance, and freedoms, fundamental freedoms with technology. I think this is a big part which we took into account in the way we've been building Decent from the very beginning. One of the main problems that we face with the big data economy today is surveillance capitalism. Not only we have surveillance from the state, so they want to like monitor us, and we have even very heavy surveillance state machinery operating right now because of terrorism, the crisis of migration in Europe and all of that. But we have a model of governance where big companies are doing surveillance capitalism. They surveil us, they aggregate the data in order to make profits. And this is huge, and that's how we fund technology, through surveillance advertising-driven business models. So what are the risks when we talk about surveillance, and what are the claims we should have as movements and as radical government governing in cities or on the national level, what we should be doing against surveillance?
Yeah. Thank you, Francesca. So we don't need to explain the Snowden revelations about mass internet surveillance. I think we are all very clear where we are at. And I think we are all clear that mass internet surveillance represents a fundamental clash with everything that people are discussing here. Any idea of digital democracy, becomes very problematic when you know that everything is being watched, both by companies and by states. The question is, what can democratic cities do? I mean, I was asked to, I was trying to focus, like in this context, And the starting point is that there is an absolute failure to regulate mass surveillance at the state level. Mainly, governments try to regulate the activities of the intelligence agencies, collection, retention of data, access, targeting, and dissemination. Those are the key aspects of more or less any surveillance regulation law, if there is one in the country. And they do that from a traditional rights perspective, which is around trying to define suspicion, probable cause, what should be the right, trying to define necessity and proportionality from a human rights perspective, again, oversight, who is watching the watchers, those sorts of things. And unfortunately, this misses some critical aspects. One starting point is that you're trying to regulate at the national level something that is actually international. People talk about the NSA and the Americans. We are actually at its core is actually a network of 35 countries, last time it was counted, ranging from Ethiopia to Spain as well. So it's quite hard to regulate that within one country. And mass surveillance, within a democracy and the country, it absolutely poisons the relationship between citizens and governments. And this includes both basic liberal assumptions about what a democracy is and radical democratic experiments. So this is not just about these particular tools being watched. It's like it poisons everything, And that's one of the things that makes it quite interesting, that you see like really broad alliances right now discussing this issue. But to change this is not enough to gain political power. We saw that Podemos wants to get the Center for the Centro Nacional de Inteligencia, if they get into government, which let's see. If it happens, we are trying to regulate, I work on trying to regulate the equivalent in the UK. And I can tell you, it's going to be very, very difficult, even if you have power, to be able to control the activities of the intelligence agencies. Amongst other things, because mass surveillance builds systemic secrecy. I think that's something that people like WikiLeaks have been talking a lot about. It creates a parallel secret state that can barely be controlled even by the official state. And that is a really, I mean, that is a tough nut to crack. So that is a problem. We park it to one side and say, well, what can we do from the local level? You know, we cannot tackle the, we can, I mean, I think we should try to regulate the Center of National Intelligence from a human rights perspective and everything else, you know. What can you do locally? So I just want to talk about three key defining aspects of modern internet surveillance that can be handled partially or where you can intervene as a local radical democracy. One is datafication, the drive on data. Second, infrastructure. And the third, risk management and concepts of risk. On data, I mean, datafication has been obviously the main focus of the internet surveillance. You know, we all know that mass surveillance needs masses of data. The NSA is building a huge data center in Utah. I'm sure all of you have seen pictures, you know, or at least of the working site. And the UK is building a massive internet of all internet users and internet devices in the world. You know, they just have to, they're just literally mapping the whole of the internet. And all that happens thanks to the new data science, you know, and that allows unprecedented data mining at the population level. That is one of the new aspects of mass surveillance. Internet surveillance is 99% about the metadata, the data. If you hear NSA whistleblower Bill Binney talk about how he started doing internet surveillance, he started actually looking at encrypted radio communications from Russians in Turkey, trying to understand how the traffic patterns of encrypted radio, where he couldn't understand what they were saying, could be used to predict the imminency of an attack. And when he started doing internet surveillance and designing the systems that are in use more or less now with variations at the NSA, he started from the same approach. So I don't want to know what you're doing, so what is the content, what you're saying. I want to know how, when, and who you are talking. And that is the thing. So the key things around internet surveillance, and they're like the critical insights that you get, is social graphing and pattern of life analysis. Those are the two critical things that come from there. And those are big data questions, are questions around the epistemology of big data, prediction, correlation, things, and all the same issues that we talk about elsewhere. Fairness of predictability. Is it okay to kill people with drones on the basis of metadata? Is it okay to give people a bad credit score? It's the same fundamental issue that you have there. But it's also about power, you know, about who owns the information, who knows more, and who knows about whom. So there, I think, you know, the basic things that a local democratic city will need to do is to start thinking hard about ownership of data and also about transparency of algorithms and the technology behind it. And obviously, all these tools have to be shining examples, you know, of how to do things right. Yeah? Next thing is infrastructure. Obviously, surveillance relies on a massive, complex symbiosis that Francesca was describing between state agencies and commercial corporate interests, mainly around the repurposing of private infrastructure, and that is private from cables to data centers, you know, from Facebook, for state surveillance purposes. It's not as simplistic as saying that Google, Vodafone, or Facebook work for the NSA. I think that would be wrong to say. There are complex issues around the legacy telco regulation, where traditional state telephone agencies would work with the government, to the way that Apple or Google understand the relationship with the government, which is like much more complicated. You know, they will always fight, you know, they will put encryption. So I think we have to understand that this is not as simple as saying Google is working with the government. And also, one problem is not just a conspiracy or a grand design to make surveillance. The question here is how technical decisions enable mass surveillance. This is what some people have called extra statecraft. People like Keller Easterling, the urbanist, you know, she's talking about technical regulations and practices that generate de facto and declared forms of polity faster than any quasi-official form of governance can legislate them. I think it's a bit convoluted to say, but this is what we all live every day. You know, technology moving faster than law can touch it. And here, you know, she also discussed how small changes can become multipliers. So she talks about the car, mobile phones, and I think that this is one of the things that whenever we introduce new technology, a new tool, you know, we don't know what is going to happen, you know, once that those things are implemented on a mass scale, and that's something that we really need to start looking at. I mean, I think when we start looking at internet infrastructure from the point of view of surveillance, we look at internet exchange points, which are the choke points for surveillance of the internet. There is a massive global disparity, with most peering taking place in the developed world. You know, there's very little cross-traffic within Africa, for example. You know, and that is so there are huge power infrastructure over who controls the internet exchanges and the power there. Also, there are the routers that are sitting there. Some of them got actual spyware built into the router, mainly for traffic management, that spyware can be switched on to start sending data to the NSA or another government. So that is one big discussion. The other data centers, of course, we all know about Facebook and Google building massive data centers, which are like honeypots for surveillance. That is obviously a massive problem. That is the core of the PRISM program with the NSA. That has to be tackled. But also things like the fiber optic cables. I mean, the access to the global fiber optic network at the landing points, that has like raises huge issues about what is the digital border. I mean, states right now claim that whenever a cable touches their border, they have a right to put there a control, because this data coming into my country, I need to know what's coming in or out. And no one has understood until now how these things should be properly regulated. There's an international UN treaty on cables, which touches on whether you can fish on them, what happens if you break them, but it doesn't say anything about surveillance, on tapping the cables. And there's been going on, it's a 150-year-old treaty. It's never decided. They never thought about discussing this. But that is one of the key questions, the idea of digital realms, states, and the internet and how those things play. That is a critical question in the cable infrastructure that has not been discussed. Brazil has tried to bring control to infrastructure. They found big problems because one is that there are no easy alternatives to Cisco or Juniper or Huawei. The other problem you have as well is that you cannot just regulate extra statecraft and technology with laws. You need to actually look at, there are technical issues, standard bodies, like the Internet Engineering Task Force, ISO, you name it. So it's actually really hard to say we are going to be independent, going back to the technology sovereignty is a very, very difficult question. I mean, you have to work on it, So we also need to understand much better what are the impacts of technological choices. For example, every Cisco router has got a tool called NetFlow, which is something that you can use to analyze the traffic in Cisco. That is used by governments in the UK to generate mass internet surveillance that is used to analyze the packets of the internet as they go along. So if you put a Cisco router and you enable NetFlow, or even if you don't enable it, you are building a little building block of surveillance. Same thing with GSM encryption. When people build the GSM system, they didn't think very well how the encryption could be misused, and now we understand very well, that is like one of the key blocks of a lot of the NSA activities is to exploit those things. So we need to understand, looking at the past, we need to understand what are the issues that we need to look at in the future surveillance infrastructures that we are building. When we start building the smart cities in Barcelona and Madrid, when we are looking at the Internet of Things, we really need to try to learn from those mistakes to understand, how these things are going to work. And fundamentally, governments need to start regulating infrastructural issues separately from the access to individual streams of data. So at the moment, you have the same warrant in the UK that gives you access to the cables and access to the data. The point is that those warrants run on a rolling system every 6 months, they get renewed. So you actually have a permanent system of access to the infrastructure, and that gives you also a permanent system of access to the information. And you need to separate physical access from particular requests for information that may be controlled through human rights frameworks. And then the last point is about risk. And this is something that is less discussed, but surveillance is normally justified in the name of combating global terrorism. Yeah. So a lot of internet surveillance is actually related to geopolitics. It's nothing to do with terrorism. It's about controlling about Chinese malware, about knowing what Russian hackers are doing. It's about the global fight for strategic dominance of the internet. Basically, that's what it's all about, really. But the public discourse is all about terrorism. And since 9/11, something that people like Louis Seymour, who have been looking at is how the concepts of risk have been changing, how we look at terrorism. So before, you were looking at probabilities and whether there was a probability of a terrorist attack, and your responsibility as a politician or as the mayor of a democratic city would be to stop a probable attack. Now you have to stop any possible attack. We moved from probability to possibility. And the fact that you need to stop any possibility of any attack means that basically you set yourself to fail because you're never going to do it. And that generates a complete crazy spiral of endless surveillance because you are never going to stop at an attack. A new attack demands more surveillance, and you end up where we are right now. And that is like a really tough thing to crack, and one where, again, local governments can start breaking the cycle. Also because risk has been broken down in the past few years. There's very complex science of risk management where you break down risks, like the US financial products, like the mortgages and things that we saw, and they are repackaged. So for example, right now, a terrorist is not a black or white thing. You are a terrorist if your dynamic risk profile that is being calculated all the time live based on your internet activities, goes over a certain threshold. And that is that is why you need to have all these masses of data being analyzed constantly, because so we are all potential terrorists. Here is where local politicians, could really take a big step, and try to break the narrative of terrorism by starting to break the narrative on risk. So just to recap, like local democracies can intervene in surveillance through infrastructure, data risk, and datafication and risk. That's some things that you can do. Thank you.
Talking about surveillance is always poses in front of this huge challenge, and I think you said it very clearly. There cannot be popular sovereignty and economic sovereignty and political sovereignty if we don't get technological sovereignty as well. I think this is very clear. I mean, when you were talking about the implication of what the NSA does, you were saying prediction, correlations, and probabilities. This is exactly what Google is doing. I mean, it is not by chance that the big technology companies that today operate and are entering very, very dynamically into operating our transportation system, our health data, our education system, like everything is slowly being kind of eroded from the power of the state, and more these companies are running our basic infrastructure basically with the same models. That is the surveillance model of doing things. So it is a massive thing. And I was looking when India blocked Facebook.org. I mean, if we think about it, the generation of the 15M, or even the new generation of digital natives, for them, in a lot of global south, the internet is Facebook. I mean, I think we have to start realizing that these are very strong political fights that will determine our ability to be autonomous in the future. I mean, if Facebook starts selling infrastructure as the basic infrastructure that will give digital inclusion and access to health and education to poor people in the global south as de facto solution that before was provided by a public institution, I mean, we are entering into a corporatized world where we no longer control and we are not going to be able to fight back. I think this is very important. So I think really linking this popular sovereignty with technology sovereignty is very important to move forward. So thank you very much for this. I will open up to a round of comments, questions coming from all of you guys. So we have some time for a round of questions. I mean, it could be on what's your experience here about everything we're discussing, or just random comments. Put your hand up if you... Yeah?
Hi. Thank you very much for the speaker. There were very nice reflections, and some of the ideas suggested by Paolo, well, it could sound some self-referential because they are quite related with the latest research we're doing in Decent, where we have been thinking you make a great distinctions about the different forms of democracy, but also in the latest research we have been exploring also the digital process of democracy also implies some kind of effects, like how information is presented, how users can interact within platforms, can constrain some kind of democracy or some kind of participatory processes. And even in Decent, we saw different kind of platforms, like some of them were devoted for fast decision making, like showing arguments and rating arguments like your priorities, while others here, like Consul, were much more focused in a discursive way with some discussion like threads. So in a general point of view, there is no single solution for every problem, but which is the best way to promote discussion among citizens to also promote deliberation in a democratic process.
Do we have our other comments? Yeah?
Thank you very much for hosting this event, and thank you very much to the speakers who have articulated a very powerful set of ideas. I'm just curious, when you look to achieve direct democracy and economic empowerment, what efforts are you making to being inclusive of other people who may not share the same opinions and views as yourselves? Views, political views as yourselves.
Vale. So in response to Pablo, I think that, one of the ways, I cannot respond on efficiency. I think the people who design these platforms have much better know-how and direct knowledge. But what I think is interesting, that is connected to the question, is that for a long time people took digital democracy to be about substituting the representative system as such, right? While actually what you find now is that the most interesting processes of digital democracy, at least to my eye, are the ones that are trying to reshape internal organizational democracy. The democracy within parties, within factions, within groups, and possibly in the future within unions, which is actually something very interesting because it is a strategic point where the weakness of the present system mostly lies. Because people, why are they so distrustful of traditional parties and organizations? Because they see that when they vote them, support them, they give them an unnegotiable mandate. You vote Podemos or PSOE or whatever it is. Especially traditional parties, the new ones have these instruments built in, but then you know that you're not going to hear from them, you're not going to be able to intervene on them for 5 years, right? Well, actually, to rebuild these day by day, week by week relationship is fundamental to increase the sense that citizens are having an effect. Yeah? So basically, it is an aggregative effect that is not creating a politics of pure consensus where everybody in the community has to agree, but to aggregate positions which are conflictual, which are then going to fight in the political scene, right? But to know that, for example, if you think in a certain way, you can discuss with people who are closer to your position, find an internal consensus within a section of society, and then move on to the next step, fighting with other forces who have unnegotiable, completely different views, because this also connects to your point. I don't think that, conflict is going to be there forever. And I don't want really to include people who have a completely different idea from mine. But an important process already that we can do is to get an agreement among people among which there is a certain basic consensus about basic things. And I think that there is a very important process in its own right.
For me, the line for you would be participation versus trolling, basically. That is the line. In my experience in platforms, it's like, that's where I draw the line.
The disagreements and different opinions and point of views are structural in a complex society. It's not something you can avoid. It's something that you will have, and it's a good thing from my point of view, because it gives you different points of views, because people are having different structural positions in a complex society, which is a good thing. But the point is, how are we going to be efficient in taking into consideration all these point of views in order to have, let's say, an informed strategy for a topic, for example. The problem is that the ways that we tend to solve these kinds of problems the last thousands of years is by cutting off most of these different approaches, by concentrating power, and very few people take decisions. That's why most of them are creating problems instead of improving our society.
Any other things or comments? Yeah? You want to speak out?
I found very interesting what the Greek guy said. This part about the left thinking too much on the political discourse or political idea that's going to push whatever government place they're handling, and not thinking that much about the concrete details or implementation of the stuff. I also think a lot about morals of the left, the morals of the left. So thinking that they are the right defense of the people and that they represent basically everybody that it's not rich. And I think they forget a lot the feelings of people that are also not rich, but that have right emotions, values, and feelings, right? So, I mean, I like criticizing the left, although I would consider myself. And I found your point also very interesting because you said, yeah, it's basically, that's democracy. We just, have another idea and we all get together and it's okay. And I would say maybe it's not okay, exactly, because how does the left, when the left is in power, think, okay, this is the good decision, and this other 30% of the people that are not voting for me or actually voting against me, they're just wrong, okay? So that would be in the ideological part. And in the practical part, which is the part I said I found interesting, yeah, it's a real issue, how to control the left when they're in power, but control them to the part of implementation, where it's, tickling their, going to where they all, yeah. So how to expose that? How to tell them, okay, you're in government now. I would say that left movements, the right movements are enterprises, right? So they know how to manage. The left movements are ideological. So they know how to speak and how to say, this is the right way. This is for everybody, and this is the thing. So I don't have a solution, but I just wanted to stress that point because I thought it was not very clearly understood, and I found it key. And I was just to give some things I found interesting. In Spain, choosing by lot, having a committee of citizens that is, or some other government committee, being chosen by lot, so randomly choosing from your body of citizens or your body of newspaper journalists or judges or whatever, is something that is unknown, and that I just wanted to give the idea that we could try to use that. No? So, for example, in Greece it was used, the boule was used to handle the implementation details of maybe the assembly and things of that sort. And also for the technical people, how to develop a standard of political expressions, how to develop a standard of political communication. Standard.
Yeah, that's what we're going to discuss in the next round of parts. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Well, do you want to have any direct response? I can say something about, you mentioned, clearly there are very technocratic expertise that are governing today. It's not just, for me, it's not just a matter of the right and the left. There are programs which are privatizing basically everything, which are currently running or shifting lots of the kind of public taxation in the hands of banks and big multinationals without reinvesting in the real economy. There are big problems which are implemented by technocratic organizations, mainly big accountancy firms, big managerial firms, which are embedded as a lobbyist, but also really in the day-to-day making of legislation norms and operations. So I think for the left party, for parties and even forms of organization like this one that don't have a clientele, you don't have lobbyists, you don't represent the interests of the powerful, it's very hard to build the capacity to, undo that form of machine and build the new one. I think this is what we're trying to do.
Sí. Disculpa, Fra. Que yo quería comentar unas cosas que ha dicho Paolo, ahora me traduce Antonio. Una era que me parece bien el modelo, ¿no?, entre ese plebiscitarismo top-down y ese municipalismo o ese ciudadanismo bottom-up, ¿no? Pero creo que es una buena imagen, pero en realidad todos los procesos son top-down y bottom-up, siempre, a la vez, ¿no? Y, por ejemplo, hay por ejemplo, en Podemos, ¿no?, hay una visión política más top-down, ¿no?, desde la dirección, porque yo creo que hay, primero, no hay una visión, una comprensión de la izquierda más clásica, tipo Podemos, de lo que es la tecnología y las potencialidades que tiene para la organización, o se hace de manera plebiscitaria. Pero también eso en parte también está pasando en los gobiernos del cambio, ¿no?, que tienen una idea más de abajo arriba, pero también la institución te obliga, ¿no?, Entonces, yo creo que en realidad podemos avanzar mucho más en organizaciones de inteligencia colectiva, y yo creo que Podemos no se ha atrevido. Creo que el municipalismo de cambio está a ver si se va a atrever o no. Pero también quería romper como esta idea de que solo puede ser como... Yo creo que también podemos hacer un mejor top-down. No solo es mejorar el bottom-up, sino el top-down, ¿sabes? Porque el bottom-up puede ser eficiente y el top-down puede ser más distribuido. ¿Vale? Bueno, esto lo quería comentar, creo que...
Yeah, I think so. So he basically says that he agrees with Paolo's general scheme about plebiscitarianism top-down and then ciudadanism being bottom-up. And he commented that Podemos is not understanding the potentialities of new technologies, and is basically a model thinking, basically articulated around the top-down model, that municipalism tried to run with the other model, the bottom-up, but in the end is somehow, stretched and falling in many cases in the top-down model. And that in the end, in every process, you have both. You have bottom-up and you have top-down. And that the real challenge is to construct new forms of organizations that are able to catalyze collective intelligence, and that in the end, the goal is to make the bottom-up dynamic more efficient and to make the top-down dynamic more distributed. And what Paolo thinks about that.
It wasn't a question. It was just a comment. Just to say that the tendency to keep the decisions for yourself. It's a broader problem of how we conceptualize leadership. Leadership not only at the level of not at the highest level, but in different levels. And this is a problem that I would say that the industrialized society sort of gave the image, the picture, the visualization of how society should be commanded, and most of the times left-oriented people or organizations have the same conception or tendency of doing that. We are in a transition phase, and according to my understanding, what distinguishes the left in this new period, in this new era, from the left from the right, is whether you are committed in giving, in incorporating all the people, not only the ones that have economic power in crucial decisions or not. The left-oriented organization, so to speak, is the one that believes and fights for everyone to have access to these crucial decisions, while the right wing, so to speak, of this new era, organization or how to say, or agency, strongly believes that the good thing would be crucial decisions to be at the hands of few people, mainly the ones that have the economic power.
Yeah, I mean, responding to Torres' question, I mean, yes, I do agree that it is not, I mean, the usefulness of the plebiscitary vis-a-vis participatory model is that you have ideal types, and then you can construct a graph, right? And then locate different points and say, this kind of phenomenon more or less corresponds to that, no? Is what sociologists like to do, to divide reality into, in a 2x2 boxes, so you can order it, no? But it's never gonna perfectly fit in any of them. And I also do agree that actually we need a better top-down dynamic. I mean, what we need is better emergent leadership, right? Better emergent leadership, in which participation is actually about creating consensus for emergent positions, right? And that is something you see all the time on social media, right? When you campaign Arise, and this campaign Arise because somebody had an act of leadership, in a sense it initiated something, but then that act of leadership only comes through if there are people who support it. It is a sort of hypothesis that is confirmed as long as it acquires the sufficient bottom-up support to then basically turn from possibility into reality. No? And I think that is precisely an example of the exercise we need to do, to go a bit beyond these tried categories that we inherit from 20th century extra-parliamentary left, fundamentally, and neo-anarchism, which basically see leadership as necessarily bad, representation as necessarily bad, which is not something that we can allow ourselves in the present moment, because we are in situations of leadership and representation. So we need to make sense of how we can make them democratic. Yeah?
Okay, consensus, good. Yeah, so we move on. Thank you very much. A round of applause. Bravo. Thank you. So bear with us. So the next session will be really about sharing some of the technical experiments we've done with Decent, and also some, like, the view that we have developed by looking at many different democracy tools which are out there, experimenting them, testing them, helping community to grow them, and developing an idea of how really we can grow an ecosystem that can scale and we can sustain. I think this has been, it is today the main question, to make sure that all the tools and the discussion also that were developed during the lab in these 5 days, we can build an ecosystem that we can continue to see grow, and people can use it in a community of maintaining these technologies. I think we can only do that by using open source software, of course, and open standards, and built-in privacy by design and security, and being aware of all the risks and the need of reappropriation of technology. I have to say, you need to know, like, Decent is part of a bigger portfolio of projects which run in the European Commission. I've been myself very actively into lobbying Europe to devote more investment and more public money to build alternatives. Before, Decent is funded in a project is called CAPS, Collective Awareness Platform for Social Innovation and Sustainability. Before that, in Europe, most of the public money, which is our money, taxpayers' money, is going to subsidize the incumbents. It's mainly going to telecom operators, to the big corporations, very little to experiment with alternative and civic technology for the common good and for democracy. And I think we should be proud of being initiating of a wave, which we hope it can be bigger, because we cannot build this infrastructure without investment, and proper technical teams and proper work can have to be paid and sustained. So I leave it to Jaromil to kick off, and so we will see. Yeah, and I leave you my.
Thank you, Francesca. I think what we are trying to address now is too engaging to not be modest. So there is a zombie walking in the room. We sort of summoned it, this zombie of neoliberalism, and I think it's an interesting metaphor. It is a necrotizing body, that of capitalism somehow, and zombies are eating brains of other people. No? So basically what we see is a situation in which there is a crisis of processing this information, but an acceleration in processing information, private information of people, and on the other side, an inability to actually use this information properly. And these sort of flows that we have, technical flows into the very body of governance, they can be an occasion for the neoliberist zombie to eat more brains. So we will have all these mega corporations offering their services in processing information to states and therefore taking out sovereignty from states. We are seeing this process already. There are platforms online that know more than what a government knows, what the population knows, what a circle of friends knows about themselves. So it is an engaging task to envision how to build the technical solution to this. It's not, we aim at building a toolkit. It's described in this booklet that you see around the Decent toolkit. And it's a process. It's an open source process. It's all free software, and this is an important answer that we give to all this proprietary infrastructure that is proposed as a solution and has been adopted and keeps in a lock-on many governments and many municipalities, and it is appropriable. And what my colleagues here will present you is an architecture. We envision this architecture. We try to dissect the body of governance, and we try to identify the bone structures, the bones of this governance. And these are our first attempts, thanks to this project, to actually build alternatives that can be appropriated, can be grown, can be translated, and can be studied and redistributed. So I ask you to start, Amy, if you like, with an overview of the tools.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, I'm Felicity, and this is Amy, and we're both software developers with ThoughtWorks, which is a global technical consultancy. We work on all sorts of projects, and we're one of the Decent partners. So yeah, you've been introduced pretty effectively to the ideas behind Decent at this point. I hope everyone's hanging in there okay. Yeah, so ThoughtWorks and Dyn have worked on 4 tools between us, which are very closely linked, which are Objective8, Freecoin, Mooncake, and Stonecutter. Objective8 is a collaborative policy drafting tool. Freecoin is a social digital currency. Stonecutter is a secure single sign-on service, and Mooncake is a secure notifications application. And we've made all of these applications as open source projects with the intent that they'll be easier for people to prove that they're honest, because they can look through the code base and see that we're not sending people's data elsewhere. We've hoped that this can also help build a community around the tools that over time, open source contributors can help to work on the project and can help them to grow. And also, since they're open source, anyone can deploy them without needing to rely on third parties or paying a fee to get it set up. We've also made the tools, as much as we can, interoperable and integratable by virtue of our reliance on open standards, which will let us integrate with both inside and outside the Decent ecosystem. So for instance, Mooncake uses the Activity Streams 2.0 standard and consumes like feeds, sort of like how Facebook presents a feed to you in a similar way, so that you can link multiple tools together and keep up what's going on in your network. Stonecutter is an OpenID Connect compliant tool for serving as single sign-on, linking together lots of things, and that also uses JSON web signatures, which is also used by Mooncake to ensure that all communication between the tools is legitimate and hasn't been intercepted. We've tried to make the tools privacy aware by virtue of informing the users exactly what's happening with their data and what's going on with how the application can use that data and how much power it has over it. And also we've worked on security, which is covered in more detail in our GitHub repositories, if you want to check it out. We've got a security file. Yeah, and everything's done on HTTPS and TLS, and yeah. So this is our tech stack. I'd like to talk quickly about some of the more interesting things here. So all of our applications are written in Clojure, which is based on the JVM, and we've chosen to use this because the functional nature of the language leads to an ease for rapid development. Ring is a wrapper around the Java Web Servlet API, which also has a lot of nice tools for helping out the middleware. Docker is a really cool bit of technology for containerizing software so that it can run in any location that you want to run it in, and also has some technology for cutting down on the overheads of running multiple applications on the same machine. And Enlive is a selector-based templating and transformation system for handling Clojure and HTML. And yeah.
Okay, so let's talk some more about the individual tools. Starting with Objective-A, our collaborative policy drafting tool. Objective-A allows organizations to work with their members to produce transparent and crowdsourced policy and manifestos. What this tool aims to achieve is an alternative to the current secretive policymaking process. Instead, members of the organization can have their voice heard directly. It aims to bridge the gap between people who make the policy and the people who are affected by that policy. For example, say my local council just spun up an instance of Objective-A. I could voice my opinions on the recycling provisions by creating an objective. Other members of the constituency and members of the local council could make comments, add questions, answer questions on my objective, which would allow me to gauge an idea of what all these people think about my ideas before I've even made a draft. Once I have more of an idea about what exactly I want to change, I can create a draft, and then members of the constituency and local council can add comments and annotate those drafts directly. I can use this data to iterate upon my drafts, add more information, improve upon them. Once we've mostly reached a consensus, the local council can then take all of this collaboration on the drafts and make changes to the recycling provisions. Moving on to the next tool, Stonecutter, our single sign-on tool. So Stonecutter provides federated and privacy-aware user management for organizations. It's an easily deployable OAuth2 server, which allows organizations to customize the appearance according to their branding. A single sign-on is popular functionality in ecosystems. It's usually provided by big organizations like Facebook, Google, and Twitter. And it allows you to sign into multiple applications just using one username and password. The problem with using things like Facebook, Google, and Twitter is that you're telling them exactly which websites you're visiting. While this might not be a problem with most of the websites you visit, some people might not feel comfortable sharing, for example, which political party they support. Another problem might be that these organizations already store a lot of data about you. They know things like who your friends are, who your family are, where you live. This is a lot of information that they can share with applications that request it. Using something like Stonecutter allows you to have this separation between the information you want to share with applications and the information that you want to share with your friends and family. And lastly, Mooncake. Mooncake is a tool to securely notify your members of events and activity in your ecosystem. We've been working with the World Wide Web Consortium to develop the Activity Streams 2.0 standard. This standard describes how applications should publish actions that users have taken in their application using JSON-based syntax. A single instance of Mooncake can consume multiple activity streams data sources and compiles them into a live feed. Users can also choose which applications they want to receive notifications from and which kinds of notifications they're interested in. For example, say your instance of Mooncake was linked to an instance of Objective A, users would see every objective that's created and every question that's asked. And they could be linked to those questions and objectives. Say you linked another application, for example, Freecoin, you would also see every transaction that has been made. In this way, users can see their entire network of applications through one application with easy links to direct them to the relevant location to get more information. We have a number of organizations which are using Objective-A and Stonecutter. The New Garden Cities Alliance is looking to develop an accreditation process for garden cities. They're using Objective-A to crowdsource the definition of what a garden city is and to draft their accreditation process. Inside ThoughtWorks itself, our LGBT plus group is using Objective-A to modify company policy to be more inclusive of minority groups. Since this is related to company policy, they're using Stonecutter to limit access to trusted users only. The West Midlands Mural campaign is using our tools too in the next couple months. This is a new mayoral position in the UK, and Objective-A is being used by the candidate from one of the major parties to draft their manifesto. They're using Stonecutter to allow users to have that separation between their political accounts and their social media accounts. The party is hoping that this will create a bridge between the mayor and the people on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, so we hope that with the current interest that the tools have got, that over time they can help organizations begin to act in a more democratic and transparent manner, and that with support from the open source community and from people in general, that they can continue to expand and grow, and that over time new tools can be added to the ecosystem with the same ethics of openness and transparency and privacy at heart. And with time, we hope that these tools can help us move to a more decentralized society and reduce the reliance that we have on the commercial products that are currently the norm for this sort of thing. And that's about all from me, and I think I'm handing over to Yaramil.
Thank you, Felicity and Amy. We have another presentation from a tool that we learned from, because of course with Decent we had a field research, a participatory research. A big part of the project was also understanding what exists, what are the practices there. And here in Spain you have a very successful example, which is Agora voting, and we have Eduardo to present it. In the meantime, I will set up some slides.
Thank you, thank you. Well, Agora voting is an open source secure voting system. We are a small company based here in Madrid, but our aim is to create the world leading open source secure voting system. And thank you for the presentation. Being open source has some advantages. For example, the collaboration with other projects, like in the case of Decent. We have collaborated with them. Thanks to this collaboration, for example, we have been able to improve the way we deploy our systems. So that's one great output for us. And well, what I will present is basically our tool. Can we exchange to that? Thank you. It's easier that way. Okay, so an apology because the transparency, the presentation is in Spanish, but you know, I speak in English. The presentation is Spanish, so you can follow even if you don't know any of the languages. So we have had multiple clients, all kinds of clients, universities, political parties, even town halls, and we are collaborating also with the Town Hall of Madrid, talking with Barcelona, and we have had some good achievements. For example, well, last year we counted around 1 million votes. We're increasing that kind of thing. We have done pretty big electoral processes, like, for example, I think it was this month or last month, I don't even remember, but we had one election with more than 150,000 votes, which is quite big for online elections. But let's talk about the technology. Well, the features is that it's flexible and easy to use. This is one of the features. The voting booth, which is the user interface that is basically a website. Well, it's very flexible. For example, this is one example where you have multiple questions that are even conditional. So if you choose no, then you cannot answer the second question. And then this is another voting booth. So you have a different theme, a different layout. It's completely different. So it's in our experience, the tool needs to be flexible so that it adapts to the needs of the organization running the election. And so that's one of the things that we have done. Well, the tally process is complex, but for example, we support multiple tally methods. So again, all kinds of organizations need all kinds of different tally methods, like Borda or simple yes/no questions, or parity calculations, so that you have enough women and enough men in specific positions. All this kind of stuff needs to be developed, and we have done that. And there are even more advanced consolidation of results. So you have, for example, a single election that has like very small elections, like having, we call it, actually there is a single electoral process, but it's divided in small groups of voters, right? But you can also take all those results together and have the whole picture. We have an administration interface, so it's quite easy to create an election. Actually, if you enter in our website, in agoravoting.com, you can register and start creating test elections. This is, for example, our test election that we were running, and it's quite easy. Just point and click and create the election, and it's quite easy. This is, for example, another part of the user interface. I'm trying to just show you the tool so that you know what we are talking about. And then, for example, the first thing that usually people think when you talk about security in elections is in the authentication, the authorization. How do you know that someone is who he says he is? And then how do you know he can vote? Well, we, as I said previously, we try to be flexible. So we have done all kinds of integrations, for example, with decent tools like Participa, for example, which is the participation tool that is used in Podemos and in Barcelona en Común. So this is a kind of a separation of duties. There is an entity in charge of the census and the authentication, and then we are not that entity, it's the political party in this case, but also we support in our own system multiple authentication methods, like one-time passwords sent through an SMS message or via email, or digital certificate like with the electronic IDs in Spain. So we try to be very flexible. About security, I think security is very important. Our tool, I think I haven't said that, so that's a fault of mine. We are focused in the private vote. If the vote is not private, then maybe you shouldn't use this tool, because it has a lot of implications, it's repercussions. No? When the vote needs to be private, then you have a conflict of interest. In one way, you need to make the vote private, but you need an election result. And also you need the election to be as transparent and verifiable as possible. So how do you do this? Well, you apply the magic of cryptography, and that's what usually what has been studied by academics, by the academia, by cryptographers. Okay, I'll be fast. We use what we call election authorities, which is something similar to interventores or apoderados, but in online elections. So each one of those have a share of the key with which the ballots can be decrypted, and what they do is basically, well, I'm trying to go faster. What they do is a mixing and anonymization of the ballots. This way, the identity of the voter is removed, and you cannot go back and see this voter voted this way. So the intention of the vote is dissociated from the voter, and this whole process is mathematically verifiable. This is what is really difficult to do and needs hard cryptography. This is part of the work that we have been doing, and it's based on, we haven't invented anything. We have based of solid, robust cryptography. We are using a standard El-Gamal, where we are based in more than 30 years of academic research. But the idea is that we are doing this in an open source way, so it's technologically independent. So you might use our tool without our involvement. And I think this is quite important, and it's transparent. You can see the source code, and if you need a small change, for example, to have a specific layout or theme, you don't need to contract us for, or you can use another contractor. So you have independence, and this is very important. I think it is one of the reasons why we can collaborate in this kind of projects like this. I think that will be more or less all. I would just need to add that there are technical procedures like this mixing and cryptography, but there are also other kind of security procedures. Like, for example, if you leave a safe, like it's shown here, open, it might be technologically a very good safe, but you're not using it right, so the privacy of the vote, for example, would be not preserved. So this is an important part of the services that we provide. And I think that's more or less all. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Well deserved. I am openly skeptical about any voting system that is electronic, I think, because there is a big danger in not having an engineer that is as smart as you to check every single computer in every voting ballot that has not been injected with malware. This is something probably to be discussed also a little bit longer with all these articles, but I do believe that your effort is outstanding with all possible implementations nowadays. I wonder if it has been tested in situation of real conflict on the faking of votes and vectors of attack could be there. So I think groups of affinity are very important. When we talk about voting, we talk about also a sort of polling, or like the administration of a party that has already a network of trust. I'm not sure we can scale up on the national level. I leave it as an open question to which I would answer no. But I like to bring forward your priorities example, because in Iceland we have a very successful software that is running basically a process of establishing priorities between citizens. And this is a different approach to voting, and it's actually on the way to actually setting objectives and gathering the consensus on them. So I leave you, Gunnar, the field for explaining us, and I will set up the slides. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for inviting me over. Like Jarmil said, I'm Gunnar, I'm from the Citizens Foundation in Iceland. And we have been doing work in electronic democracy, well, actually since the year 2000, but in the form of the Citizens Foundation since the year 2008. And we have been part of Decent since the beginning, and there's lots of good stuff that's come out of Decent, and many of you have seen that. And Decent has an influence on a lot of our work, but the best thing that has come out of Decent to me is not the software, it's not the it's not the actual objectives of Decent actually. It's the having met all those great people, some of whom I can call my friends, having worked with them, having created all sorts of connections with all sorts of people, and in that sense, Decent has been really important to us. Okay, but that aside, no, thanks. Okay, so, and one thing, I assume everybody can read. I will not read every word up there. So if you want to get everything that's there, then you both have to read and listen to me at the same time. We'll see how it goes. So I presume you read this already, so. Actually, this is preaching to the choir. I thought, should I keep this slide in or not? I'm not going to read any of this. You guys know all of this, but this is still important background. So this is like stuff that I think all of us know, the real problems with democracy. We can debate which of them are worse than the others, but this is all problems that we have to deal with. And so what we have been doing to try to help out with that, obviously lots of other people around the world, we have been parts of many different projects. As you can see, Decent figures prominently on that one. Actually, there are lots of more projects, but those are the highlights. And the highlights of your priority software is up there, and it's been used the world over. And I won't go into that, but one of the main things about your priorities is that the interface inspires debate. It encourages people to go into a positive debate about issues instead of arguing about them. And another issue is that minority and majority views have equal weight, which helps facilitate consensus. So you can see even if there's only one point against an issue, it will have the same weight on the screen as the best point for it, which may have many people supporting it already. And of course, more points if you scroll down. One of the strongest issues for your priorities is that it has a positive and focused output. It is intended to make people work together and not to fight each other. And the Icelandic Pirate Party, which is actually really good at infighting because the scale in that Pirate Party is total from extreme laissez-faire anarchists to extreme left-wing anarchists and everything in between, lots of social democrats. It's hard to, they're arguing about stuff they don't agree on. But they used your priorities before their annual meeting and found out the 3 issues, or actually more, but the 3 they picked out at the end, 3 issues that almost everybody agreed on. So it's a really good tool for getting solidarity. And I presume most of you know something about Better Reykjavik. Anyway, the Best Party, we opened it up just before the election. The Best Party had no policy platform, and it just jumped on the opportunity to use it. We just released a new version 3 weeks ago, and there's some screenshots from that here and there. So that's the front page of Better Reykjavik right now with a focus on the PP, which is running now. And we have currently worked, it's been very difficult to get the bureaucracy to work properly together. It's used to working in other ways, but now I think we're on the right track and we're working closely with them with weekly regular meetings. How are we improving things? Where are we going? And the Estonian project, there's actually more details on that in the brochure. So I won't go into details, but we called out for ideas because of scandals and political scandals in Estonia. And they called out for ideas in your priorities, worked on make that into proposals, and the end result is that 7 of the ideas have become laws in Estonia. And like I said, the Pirate Party used it, but a group called Reset Romania used it in the wake of, there was a club that burned down with lots of young people dying, and there was public outrage, and this Reset Romania group used your priorities to call out what are going to be our demands to the authorities. And they then gave those demands, and I'm sorry to say I don't have the resources to follow everything. I have no idea what came out of it. Very sorry. I would like to know, so if someone knows, then please tell me afterwards. And that's the Reset Romania page. Now, like I told you, we have a totally new version of your priorities, and it's a complete code rewrite. And I won't try to explain this geeky stuff up there, but there's already been geeky stuff. I presume those of you interested know what it means up there. but the big thing for us that it simplifies our work in the future. And this is the front page of the other PP. We're actually running 2 PPs at the same time. One in Kópavogur, which is one of the biggest cities or towns actually in Iceland, and the other is in Reykjavik, the capital. And why did we rewrite it? Well, basically because we needed a modern standards-based software that would help us to produce faster. But as you can see, we wanted to do it totally mobile, and as you can see, what happens is that we had 12% mobile usage, now we have 42%, just by changing how the user interface worked on the mobile. And also, we're gaining a better user experience, which increases participation, and I have actually data to back that up. From 2 days, only 2 days, but we just started running, and I had to do the Reykjavik data because I don't have any comparison data with the Kópavogur data. So you can see what's up there, and the most brilliant thing is that we seem to have, let's see what happens in the future, but we seem maybe to have created a platform that makes it really easy for things to go viral, which is actually what we've been trying to do. And we have about 50% of the visits coming from Facebook sharing. And one idea has 15% of the total traffic, which is not what we want, but the message that it's telling us is that this idea became viral on its own. There's no one advertising it or anything, it just poof. And you can see the rest of the numbers. I'm not going to read out them to you, but this is definitely hard data backing up that was worth all this work. Yeah. And 2 minutes. Yeah, okay. I've talked a bit about the PB, and we won an award. This is actually important. I'm not going to talk about all of them. This is our PB process. First, we start by citizens submitting ideas, which I think should be done in every PP, and it's done in most of them. But the last one is sometimes forgotten. If the stuff that's created out of PP is not being used by the people, then we need to find another ways to decide how we're going to do this. And our PP software tells people how budgeting works. You select a project, and you can't select projects when they don't fit in anymore, and you can do this in different ways. And yeah, this feature is really nice. Now we can see exactly, because people can put in locations and any photos that they want to. We can see actually if people upload photos, then those ideas get shared. If they don't upload photos, they don't get shared. Simple as that. And here we can see the ideas in Reykjavik. Here we can see the ideas in Kópavogur. This idea gathering has been going on for longer. And I'll skip the PP part because I really want to show you the last stuff at the end. Oh yeah, and we're really happy about being part of the Decide Madrid project as well. But just for the last, and I'll go through this really quickly. Now I've shown you what we have done, now I'm going to show you what we want to do. And this is active citizen. And what we want and what we need, because you remember what Francesca was telling us here earlier about Facebook and Google and collecting, and what all of you know, collecting all this info. We need something that will be our friend in this. And that is not going to be Facebook or Google because they have other objectives. That's pretty obvious. So we need new tools, maybe not one tool to rule them all, but we need lots of new tools to combine and do good, cool stuff with. And active citizen is 3 things. It's artificial intelligence agents that will help you and assist you and notify you when there's something that you're interested in. And it's powerful democracy software, which we actually have already in your priorities, but we also have lots of other really cool democracy software, and our plan for active citizen is that you will be able to integrate it into your software with as easy as possible. And the last one that's really the only sort of almost science fiction is on live events that will merge online and offline, for example, protests or meetings. Like if this meeting was done in that way, then we could have hundreds of people more really participating, but online and not physically being here. And this is just a simple AI thing, finds relevant news stories, something we've seen often, but really deepens the experience of getting more information about ideas. Notifications, actually the first version of this is working in our new version, so Active Citizen is already here, but obviously there's lots more that we really want to do on that. And the event, if you imagine a protest with, say, a few hundred or 1,000 people, but then you have maybe 100,000 people that are participating online. And I don't know, I've been at many protests, and you have this feeling of solidarity, but then you go away and you really don't know what it was all about totally. Because, yeah, you know you were protesting against this and that, but there were lots of other people. Were they really thinking the same as I was thinking. So imagine that online, at the same time, both the people at the protest, but also people far away, are finding out what is most important to us. Why are we here? And so we leave that protest not with a sort of, I'm not sure, but with a concrete agenda coming out of that. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gunnar. And welcome to our colleagues that just reached us from London, from Nesta. Orpa, I see, and Rebecca and Ambra. Hi, welcome. So we have more and more possibilities for group photos at the end. I don't know how many we have of the descent. We are so decentralized that and well, I will introduce you the last part, the most experimental tool that we have researched in descent. I will be brief because of reasons of time. You have been very kind and interested in following us up to now. But also because my colleague Marco Sasci is going to reach us soon, and there will be more debates about free coin. So it's on this. Oh, thank you, Anna. It's on this. Yeah. Yeah, we have researched something that is a little bit controversial, that in the time in which we wrote Descent was quite visionary. It's a research on complementary currencies, because if you want to really trace how power gets administered, how decisions get executed, how actual corruption gets avoided, then the follow the money principle is very important. So how do we actually build that part of the body? How we make transparent within a group, within the integrity of a group, the process of allocating resources, of spending them, and of distributing them. So my organization is a very small organization. We have been researching on the topic of complementary currencies since the early 2010. And to refrain on what was said, we have learned a lot from South America. Francesca quoted the fight for the water, the public water, which first started in Bolivia, in Cochabamba, with all the popular movements there. And actually, we learned a lot from another institution in Brazil, the Banco Palmas, which is the first bank that actually recognized the existence of complementary currencies and adopted them to revitalize economies also within very poor areas like favelas. This research has been conducted by Marco, my colleague, and we tried to translate it into a technical implementation, and we are working on it. And as much as we work on it, it's quite challenging. We realize that keeping it minimal, keeping it simple, and sticking to just a simple focusing task is the best thing to do, because it's a very delicate component. And therefore, in the ecosystem that was built by all the projects in Descent and has been presented with you, we found a lot of help, because we didn't build the sign-on. We integrated with Stonecutter. We didn't build the activity stream, the updates. We just used what was there. So in brief, our research has been starting right at the time in which also another phenomenon that broke a taboo on money happened around the world, Bitcoin, with all the buzz that came after. So the huge amount of investments from the financial industry, the huge amount of deception that the very industry and the institutions have done, because Bitcoin is is a little bit too problematic to name. So all of a sudden, blockchain became the hype, and the DAOs will become the next hype. But the basic innovation that we really identify into this phenomenon is that a taboo was broken, the taboo of actual financial administration and how actual finance could be built or rebuilt from bottom up. So we built on the success of certain technologies, analyzing them mostly from their social emergence, so pre-exploitation from the financial industry. And we started asking ourselves, what if we substitute certain parts of this successful technology into a human process? So we started wondering about this proof of work part of Bitcoin, which is completely machinic, is actually the proof that you have burned some electricity into a computation. What if that proof will be actually socially agreed in an assembly, in a collective political process proof? And how do we deal with the connection between the machine and the humans there? So, of course, our research concentrated on trust, because that is also at the basis of the crisis, of the financial crisis. It is a crisis of trust. And while you have an abundance of trust in the streets with people just like parking their tent and sleeping in the main square with Occupy, you don't have a real instrument, as has been said in the first part of this panel, to actually structure that trust. Some structure that banks and the mega corporations already have, and they are not going to give up, and they are keeping as proprietary. So we interrogated ourselves, what can be reliably built on top of this? And FreeCoin came out as this fairly simple framework of remuneration, which is also definable as a social wallet. It's not a blockchain per se. There is so much buzz. Everyone is doing a blockchain right now. If you don't put a blockchain in your software, you're no one. So basically, we decided to hook the blockchains that exist to study the actual APIs that start being in common with all the blockchains, and to build a wallet, so the human interface that actually will put data on them, or not, will keep some data actually not exposed, because when we talk about public blockchains, we talk about total exposure as well. So in brief, this is what we envision it, and it came out as a tool that is fairly simple, is still in theory, it's at a good point, and it can be applied both for social movements, but even for agile groups of organizations in which we want really to eliminate the burden of management and rebudgeting and make it a process that is fairly horizontal, so that colleagues can actually exchange the currency between themselves without a constant renegotiation of the budget allocation. And this is how we implemented it, more or less. We stayed true to the choice of ThoughtWorks of developing things in Clojure. We found it a very interesting new language. Lisp also is a Lisp dialect, offers a lot of possibilities for building a bigger application without risking too much the error of programmers. It's a stateless, non-imperative language, so it doesn't offer so many pitfalls to programmers that code it, and it can be well documented. We publish, as all the tools that have been presented, everything as free and open source. And in particular with the Clojure applications, but I saw also your priorities, which is written in Ruby.
It's in the JavaScript, sorry, this is Robert's thing.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. Hi, Robert. We miss you.
I know, but no, it's in JavaScript, and it's like using those Google tool Polymer and material design. Yeah. So it's not Ruby on Rails anymore.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you started
so that was one reason, because Ruby on Rails really wasn't modern enough anymore. So we had to move away from that.
It is a process of trying to find more and more reliable and technologies that we can build upon. Everything, as I said, is published online on repositories that you can actually read, and we try to make the code as readable as possible. And I understand all people that we have here are struggling also to have test units, so full test coverage. I guess you also have that in Agora Voting on the most delicate things, which is an important practice. So we are not pumping out, we are not following the startup model, which is, would be pretty neolib from us to do that, of pumping out a product as soon as possible and putting the burden of a beta on the users, but we are trying to cover it up with a sort of deterministic approach so that we can verify really what the code is doing, which is an approach that is mostly forgotten in the overall acceleration of information technology nowadays.
Just to be buzzword compliant, it's Node.js. I don't know how I could forget it. That's what it's written in now.
Yeah. Well, you went through a lot of language rewriting. So we open this to a few questions. I guess we are all pretty tired, and thank you so far for your attention. Oh, Davide. Is there a question? Davide, you have a question? No, you raised, no, you were scratching. If there aren't any questions, we are fine, I guess, with this. And really, you can also pose us questions now. We will be around, and in the next days, there will be more talking about this exploration of currency, and actually perhaps also on the side of your priority. I guess in your priorities, you do have also credits, or...
Yeah, we have social points, and they're actually a sort of... We need to develop those more, because it's actually, I didn't show you that in the screenshot, but now your priorities actually has become a sort of social media, which each page idea has its own page where people can post in like informational links or just comments on it. And so we're actually going to have to expand on that social aspect with connecting people and making groups, which is going to be needing for active citizens as well. So it's becoming more of a sort of thing which sort of not a new Facebook or anything like that, but like a thing that has like multiple facets to it.
It's, I think, important because remuneration and sustainability avoids the burnout of good activists. And if you're really passionate about your cause, you need in some way to find actually the sustainability for it. So the way funds get redistributed today to representatives in the political games are very centralized. There are a few parties that are trying to actually change this sort of practice. One of them is the Movimento 5 Stelle, in which the people that are elected have accepted to give up a good part of their income in being into the position of being members of parliament to the cause of the party. And they are trying to work through the bureaucracy of redistributing actually this value into the people and the new activists that come. So it is also a question on how to destructure and destroy perhaps all the vertical concentration of leadership, of personality into the political game, into an inclusive game that can also be attractive from the point of view of sustainability. Yes, Francesca.
I think I have more like a comment for general debate. So one thing that I'm really looking forward to see is how, I mean, let's say more and more cities start engaging in this kind of experiments, and political parties and democracies and parliaments even. I mean, we have a lot of, as Descent is finishing, we have a lot of requests. Like a lot of people are writing us, they want to know more, they want to know what next, they want to try things. There is a lot of interest. And we can see here in Spain now, 8 cities, just the cities of change, all kind of working with the same infrastructures and tools and building up methods for participation, but also infrastructure for participation. So my question is more, I mean, sustaining it, yes, one part is the fund, the other question is scalability. And really, I mean, we have been lucky to work with a company like ThoughtWorks, which is a company, like quite a big company, pioneering agile development, but also doing lots for social good. So you have mission, being very involved in social experiments besides doing general business. But this is a question because, I mean, you need a pretty strong kind of capacity and capabilities and infrastructure to scale these things. When thousands of citizens are starting using this ecosystem, it becomes a bit a challenge. And I know there is debates here already with the Ciudad de Madrid and other tools. You know, they're not modular. We don't know, they're not really scalable very much. So how do we go forward in this? I mean, one thing is how we fund it, of course. So we aim for getting public money because we think this should be public goods. We didn't go to look for investors' money. We want to build public goods infrastructure. So this is one thing. But the other level is what kind of technical capacity we need in order to scale. Because, I mean, we've been doing this work for 2 years, but this is going to grow, and we will make it grow. So I don't know if people have any comments or reaction on this.
I have some specific questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was related to the technical part, but in a very particular point. Like, I found quite inspiring what Gunnar was saying about artificial intelligence in your priorities, what you have been deploying in active. I was very interested what you were saying about the active citizen, like the artificial intelligence component. Like normally, this kind of artificial intelligence is conceived for learning from the system, learning from the dynamics of the community through machine learning and statistical inference. But I'm wondering, what have you learned from deploying artificial intelligence in a democratic system?
Ouch. For one thing, I personally dislike calling it artificial intelligence. The reason I do it is because it's the most easiest understood by everybody and I don't have to explain it. Machine learning is much better, much closer to what is happening for sure. And I don't think, actually it's like less than 3 weeks since we opened the new software and we haven't analyzed the notification in there, which is really the only artificial intelligence in there. So I'm really sorry to have to tell you that I really have no data to back anything up or anything. So,
I think it's a daring experiment that is necessary because they are actually building it for us. You know, the horizon of Siri, of all these services, Google Now, it is actually to cash in on all that amount of information and make it so comfortable for you to use them that you will just feed into this loop. And before you realize it, this loop conditions your decisions. Speaking of objectives, of decisions, of priorities, and of trust. So it is really going up. It's not anymore as simple as we want to have an infrastructure to relate to each other and to vote. It's becoming really invasive and pervasive. And that's why we need to build alternatives that are out of the logic of capitalism. Yeah, we like to...
I mean, no, I think Jarmil is totally correct, but I mean, because Francesca said manipulate elections, and I mentioned that here on I think on Monday, that depending on how the user interface is designed for democratic tools, we can have an immense effect on the outcome of that democratic process. So be aware of this. Watch out the tools that you're being made to use. Are they manipulating you towards a certain direction? It generally would not manipulate like a click, but just a little swing that you don't really notice.
So I think we can conclude, and I will conclude quoting you, Francesca. It was a private conversation, so this is a little bit of a, but because in years and years of activism, then we realized that things have changed from 10, 15, 20 years ago. And we are, while we were very concerned about the panopticon of the state apparata that are that have the monopoly of violence and this like sort of Orwellian scenario that was 10 years, 20, 15 years ago, now we are facing ourselves into seeing the public, the commons, this new notion of the common, of course, not the old idea of the state, but a new notion of commons, a new dimension for the public as the last resort to defend ourselves from the worst ever sugar-coated panopticon of screen-rubbing applications built by multinational corporations that have nothing to do with our communities from bottom up. I think she says it's true, so this is something we learned in Decent, I guess, and we will continue learning on this track. Thank you, everyone, for this participation.